Welcome back to the Headbanger, the show where we interview interesting and important people here at Nash. And today I welcome Stefan Bordeianu for our final episode. Stefan, welcome.
Thank you, Davis, for having me.
Yeah, man. It's awesome to have you on the show. I don't know if anyone's ever told you, but your personality is very... I don't even know how to describe it. It's just, it infiltrates every room, but in like the best way possible. Like you stick out and you're very open. It's lovely.
Thank you.
It's perfect for our show too.
Thank you very much, Davis.
Yeah, you're welcome. And you sound like a politician right now.
Yeah. Sorry, my throat's been a bit dry because I've been a bit sick, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're good, man. When we'll get into that angle of our
the
our
political
talk later.
side.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you've been watching some headbangers before this.
Yeah.
So you know how this goes. I'm gonna ask you one question to kick us off. You ready?
Yep.
All right. What is your favorite color and why?
My favorite color. I know Muhammad in previous episodes had said that blue is a bit too mainstream, but I think blue is truly a beautiful color because I love the ocean and like I love just being by water and stuff like that. So it's like it always kind of soothes me and calms me down. And there's so many different types of blue and so many different shades and colors, and they all like evoke certain feelings. And I think it's just a really diverse but really calming color.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Well, Muhammad asked me this question too, and I like the color blue. It's just aesthetically pleasing to me. It's also like it reminds me of love, like blue and brown. They're very deep colors, like rich, especially like the color of an eye. That reminds me of like falling in love with somebody. But black is my favorite color because of the, it combines all other colors, and it has a depth that you might not expect.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanna ask you about. I mean, do you like you mentioned those shades of blue and the different emotions that it evokes? Are you one of those people that says like, blue is a cool color, but you're like, blue is a warm color? Like there are some people that hold that opinion because it almost like, instead of giving that somber, like sad effect, it kind of does the opposite for some people. Is that true for you?
Yes. I do believe that whenever I see blue, it almost makes me happier and a bit more calm. I guess it's because Nash doesn't really have windows. And so whenever I get to see a clear blue sky, it just makes me really happy because it reminds me of, being outside and stuff like that.
Amen to that, brother. Do you ever like step outside of Nash and then just get like at the end of the day and you get immediately blinded by the sun?
That happens way too often.
Okay, yeah.
My eye doctor told me that you should be outside more and see the sun because it helps your eyes not like deteriorate as fast. And that way my prescription will lessen. And I said, Doc, I can't do anything about that.
That's true.
For at least another year. So hopefully next year I'll get a bit more sunshine.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about Pitt. I mean, you're going into like, you want to be a politician, but what is that, like, what are you going to study at Pitt?
At Pitt, I plan on studying politics and philosophy. So it's a major through the Honors College, which basically... I get to receive a bachelor's of philosophy, which is a certain bachelor's program. So junior year, I have to do a big research project. In senior year, I have to defend a thesis. So it's almost like taking a master's level curriculum in your undergrad. So it prepares you a lot more for master's school, or for graduate school, excuse me. And then on top of that, I want to earn a certificate in what's called European Union Studies. So I would be taking classes in the politics of the European Union, the United Nations, and just Western and Eastern European relations in general. And I want to minor in French. So it's like I'm definitely trying to get as much of an international perspective, but then also combining that with a political side. So hopefully after this I can go to grad school, and then after that represent the United States in the international capacity.
Okay. Oh yeah, that was my next question. So you want to focus mainly on like international issues rather than domestic?
At the moment, yes. I don't know. The big turning point for me was actually this year, whenever the Trump administration moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And there were
Mm.
protests, and a few people died. A few Palestinians died, uh, from including children from the Israeli counter-protesters. And the United Nations actually filed a formal complaint, and they said this isn't correct. And that made me think a bit more about diplomacy, because it seems like politics, especially at the national level, there's a lot of things that you do that almost stretch your morality a bit, and you have to be very careful to navigate stuff like that. But diplomacy, obviously, there's going to be tough situations for you, but the chief objective of diplomacy is to make sure that you are trying to promote peace in the world, and I think that would be a really cool job.
Okay, so I have two questions. One is first addressing your statement about morality. I know this is like a huge question, so answer it however you want, and if you want to pass, it's totally fine. What do you think is the best moral system to go by, especially when you're going into such a divisive field like international politics?
Personally, I think I'm just going to go with my gut. I think I've been taught already by my great parents what's right and what's wrong. And if I feel like something's wrong, obviously I'm going to do my research. But I think most people should just go with their guts and not necessarily where the money is or where the power is. And I think that's the best way to navigate it.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's also another question about morality and like what it stems from. The Republican Party is often saying like, "Oh, we're like God's party." They. I wouldn't say that liberalism is. I mean, it's far from spiritually dead, but I guess it's not as like in your face with that like conservative Christian ideals. But how does your faith play into political decisions? Would you say, or like, are you planning on using that to your advantage, or maybe taking a different path from it? Your thoughts?
Well, first and foremost, in the Bible, it says, I think tax collectors come up to Jesus and they say, Jesus, you have to pay your dues for something. And he says, I forget exactly how the story begins, but basically, they say, why do you have to pay taxes to Caesar if you're the king? And he goes, whose face is on that coin? Caesar.
Mm-hmm.
And then it says, give what is owed to Caesar, and give what is owed to me, to me. And that kind of establishes a separation of religion and the state. So whenever people use God's names for political advantage, I think it's extremely incorrect, because everyone has different interpretations of the Bible, and what you're saying may not be true, especially if it's used to persuade a position that may be a bit more controversial. So, for example, using the Bible for abortion, well, in my opinion, it's hypocritical if you use the Bible for abortion and say, I'm here to help those who are unprotected, which is the unborn fetus. It's my job to help protect life, but then not have any gun control or any stricter background checks, and to say, well, it's different. It's your constitutional right. Because personally, I believe that everyone should have a right to their life. Obviously, women have a choice to do whatever they want with their body. I'm a dude, so I don't think it's my place to tell a woman what to do with their body. But all around, my position is I'm pro-life all around the board, and that includes saying if I can help people who don't have medical care or don't have access to medical care, if they don't have health insurance, if people are dying constantly from mass shootings, there's obviously an issue, and we're losing lives. And I think if we're going to use the Bible, which says to preserve life and to keep peace, maybe we should not narrow it down to just abortion. So that's whenever the conflict arises. Now, obviously, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party both have very good points. It's just that whenever you use Christianity to back your statement, it kind of appeals to a very large group. And it almost creates a blind following in a sense, which I think is very dangerous. So, I personally think religion will play into politics at my personal level. So whatever I learned from the Bible, from talking to people, I'm going to be able to make my own moral decisions. But I don't think I'm ever going to impose it on anyone else.
Yeah.
So,
well, especially you mentioned like the wide group of people, and in that, you know, that like the majority of Americans that prescribe to Christianity, there's definitely a split between parties. So I don't think you can make any one partisan issue like God's issue. Like I don't agree with that, but it's crazy because like that's what they try to do.
People have gotten very good at taking what the Bible says and making it their own.
Making it thing. Like exactly relevant to what their thing is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And okay, so in terms like that, with that angle of the whole political spectrum, like domestically, how do you think Trump has handled things, like the divisiveness? I mean, it's
so you're saying domestically, not internationally, right?
Yeah, I'll ask that next. I think I personally think that Trump is like two different presidents. He's almost like he has this domestic side and his international side, and one's kind of better than the other. But I want to know your thoughts, because like all of these issues that you're mentioning are both problems at home and abroad, but they're definitely dealt with differently now. So, how do you think Trump's done on both fronts? And then what do you think you would do if you were president someday?
Thank you, Davis, for that compliment saying I'm going to be president. I can't be a president technically because I was born in Romania, but I really appreciate it. That's why I'm actually taking diplomacy too, because I feel like I'm just like more connected on the international.
That's a bummer.
Yeah, but I'll definitely answer that question. But first, on the domestic side, Trump made a lot of promises whenever he ran against Hillary Clinton, including dropping out of NAFTA, building a wall, imposing tariffs, doing all these things. And honestly, he's carried out through a lot of his promises. So I definitely appreciate that. I don't appreciate how he uses Twitter to say vulgar things about people. So I don't think it's the president's duty to necessarily impose on people or like bully people almost.
Absolutely.
And I also think what he's done that's very wrong is sort of undercut the press or demean the press. So he's talked about the fake New York Times or fake news CNN and stuff like that. And really the only thing that he believes is like that he watches is Fox News. And I always tell everyone who's trying to navigate politics, I say, listen, if you really want to navigate politics, listen to NPR. Listen to the Washington Post, or read the Washington Post, read Politico, read The Atlantic, and also read sides from both. So I believe it's the Washington Post and the Washington Times. So it's both a conservative newspaper and a liberal newspaper. And then I almost everything I read is really expository, but all the opinion pieces that I read, I'll always try and read the other side, but I try and stay as close to the middle as possible because, to be quite frank, I've listened to both Fox News and CNN opinion sessions, and a lot of it's very biased, and the people that are countering the opinion that's more widely held by the audience is a lot of time it's cut off, and they're never able to really state what they want to say. So I really think that it's best to listen to the press and don't listen to what Trump has to say about the fake news, because almost every single news article gets vetted. There's a huge vetting process. There's a huge amount of research. There's a ton of aides. It has to go through an editor. Everything you read from credible news sources to some extent is true. It's just that the perspective where it comes from is different.
Most of the time, anyway.
Most of the time, anyways.
Sometimes
yes.
There's something that's like, wasn't there an instance where like somebody leaked something fake, and I think maybe CNN picked it up and like reported on it, and it wasn't true, and they had
a lot of. I do believe
it was like a suspect or something in like something that happened. They're like, oh, we got him, but it like wasn't the guy at all.
Yes, I do believe so, and I think they had a formal apology too,
Yeah,
and I
it was
think
big.
Stephen Colbert had reported on something too that was incorrect, and he apologized on it too. The thing is, though, you just can't like. My parents grew up in communism, and we had one newspaper, which was called like the Voice of the People or something super communistic like that.
And it's all
like,
printed in
that
big
just,
red letters.
Oh yeah, it's all red. So I don't know. My parents were telling me this reminds me a lot of my childhood under communism, where there was no press and everything had to be his way. And if the Philadelphia Eagles want to kneel, they're not coming to the White House.
Wow,
so I think
terrifying.
that's incorrect what Trump is doing in that sense. But he's appealing to what he said. He's filling out his promises. Now, if Trump ever listens to this, Trump, you promised to balance the budget. So I'm going to hold you up to that. Year 2 or year 3, please balance the budget for us, because we, as a younger generation, need to not worry about Social Security popping on us, the Social Security bubble popping on us, or anything like that. We just need to start lowering the debt.
So, so part of the press issue, people have often brought up the fact that Nixon was just as inflammatory against the press, and I mean, I would argue that Trump has no filter, both in private in the White House and during any press conference or any public forum of any kind, and Nixon definitely had that going for him, kind of. And, we have those leaked tapes of him like cussing out his cabinet and stuff about the press, but there's that sense of like, this is what it is. I'm gonna deal with it in public. So what do you think the difference between, besides that, like, does that make a huge difference to how you view Trump versus Nixon? And like, I mean, they both kind of like have a war against the press. I mean, why does he get so much more heat than maybe we give heat for Nixon?
I think that they both had two very different strategies. So personally, I think both men have done illegal things, and obviously both men were investigated, and one retired before he could have been impeached, and the other one is being threatened by impeachment by the Department of Justice. Not necessarily, but he's still under investigation. So I think, though, Trump's political strategy is if something happens, you just got to throw out a ton of other extra stuff. So the press doesn't know. The press can only do one story at a time. Only one person can do one story at a time. So if something happens, something big gets leaked. Like, let's say Stormy Daniels has a video. Well, then the Trump administration is going to push out a bunch of other things and leak a bunch of other things so that, okay, some people will take the Stormy Daniels piece, but look at this other huge story that's happening. Trump just said something about how he's going to make unemployment down to 2% or something like that. He's going to say something. So it's like, he's not giving people enough time to navigate. And the political cycle has become so crazy that no one even knows what to do anymore. And I got to hand it to him. That's really impressive that he can play the press like that. Do I think it's morally correct? And that's what we were talking about, morality.
Yeah.
I think it's politically very Machiavellian and very like strategic, but morally I think it's incorrect.
Yeah.
I also don't think you should be sleeping with porn stars whenever you're married. That's just my opinion.
I don't know. Oh yeah, that's a whole nother road that we should definitely avoid for now. But okay, so how about internationally? How do you think Trump's done on that front?
Well, really quickly, let me look something up. Mike Pompeo, the new Secretary of State, has been doing absolutely great, in my opinion, because he released the hostages from Venezuela. He released a prisoner from Venezuela, and he released some prisoners from North Korea. Along with that, the Kim Jong-un and his regime has been in contact with Trump's
that's huge.
presidency, and I mean, that's something that I've never seen in my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
So diplomacy between the two countries, and maybe even talk of denuclearization. Now, how far it denuclearizes, we'll see. A lot of people who are former ambassadors, who are political strategists, they're saying we're never going to get full denuclearization, even though they're coming into the talk saying we want complete denuclearization in any way, shape, or form. And in return, America's going to do free trade with you, and the economy's going to grow. So now they need to find the middle ground. And Trump has the opportunity to do some really great things.
Mm-hmm.
He also has the opportunity to cause the world economy to just implode on itself.
Blow us all up, basically, yeah.
He literally went into the Israeli conflict. We always had a two-state solution. And that takes years and years of diplomacy. And I think Trump just went in there and said, what are we doing, guys? We need to put our embassy in Jerusalem. Well, Jerusalem is a lot tighter of a city. It's a lot harder to get someone out. The nearest airport is Tel Aviv. And there's just so many security issues. You're putting your ambassadors at risk, your ambassador staff, you're putting international people at risk. And on top of that, you're putting the Israelis and the Palestinians. You're saying, listen, the Palestinians don't matter. We recognize Israel or Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, which we've never done before. And people died because of it. So Trump can't just go out and say, I'm going to do it this way internationally. Because I think, who's the president who said bad foreign policy or bad domestic policy won't get you reelected, but bad foreign policy will get you killed?
Oh, yeah. I
think it was
that.
JFK. I forget, JFK or Reagan, some good president. But I 100% believe in that, and I think that Trump has to be very careful with how he navigates the international sphere and how he interacts with everyone. I mean, this threat of a war on tariffs and the whole dropping out of the Iran deal. I'm not even going to get started on the Iran deal, but prices of gas have gone up these past few weeks, and a lot of it's due to foreign policy. So it's like, it's affecting us at the micro level, even though it's happening at the macro level.
Yeah.
And a lot of big changes are coming, and Trump has to be very careful with what happens.
So
far, so good, though.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I feel like he has his moments that shine on an international scale. And then there are things that I'm like, oh my God, this is awful. But I think, no crazy, huge conflicts yet. So that's encouraging. It's been pretty good so far. So I'm okay. The North Korea thing is huge for sure. I mean, if it works out, I don't know. I feel it. I guess I can't help but be skeptical. Not really because of our president, but more just because Kim Jong-un, murdered his uncle with dogs and whatever. It's just I don't have a strong feeling of trust with that man or the way he treats his people and the way he holds himself up. I don't know. It makes me nervous. I can't put all of my faith in it. But if he's sincere and Trump pulls this off, that'll be a huge highlight of his presidency. I think that could be huge for every part of his his re-election campaign. I assume he's gonna want to run again.
Yes.
Term 2.
I was the night before the special election between Connor Lamb and Rick Saccone. Donald Trump came down to Moon Township and he released his new slogan for the 2020? Yeah,
2020.
2020 race. So it said "Keep America Great" with an exclamation mark.
Gosh.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool that he picked his new slogan here in Moon Township, and then Connor Lamb won the election.
Yeah, it's a little. I don't know. That doesn't impress me. I'm like, dude, you've got like 2.5 years left. You can't start thinking about like campaigning again right now. You have a country to run, and like a world to be an example for. Quite literally.
That's actually the issue with a lot of domestic politics, and a lot of people from both sides can agree money is what wins elections. So Trump has to go out, and any politician does this. You get millions of dollars for congressional campaigns, and then a presidential campaign, it's a huge amount of money that comes to you in donations, and you use that for ads, you use it to hire more people to reach out to your base, and you can't win an election without money. The thing is, like the NRA said during the town hall, whenever they hosted the Sandy Hook kids, Marco Rubio said, these people buy into my beliefs. So the NRA buys into my beliefs. Well, I've never been given $1 million as a gift because I believe in something. And I don't think Marco Rubio has either. And I don't think that the liberals, get money from these teachers' unions and from the environmental agencies and all of these different lobbies that are also, in some ways, they're screwing us over too. And it's all the big money that they have to support certain things and they have to vote a certain way. So really, it comes down to the money at the national level, and people don't have an opportunity to say what they believe or really create any change. And I think that's what's really wrong right now in our country, is the big banks own a lot of stuff, and the lobbying industry own a lot of politicians. And if we could slowly demonetize, obviously there should still be money in politics, but you shouldn't be signing $1 million checks to people to vote a certain way.
Yeah.
I think that's just wrong, and the people aren't representing their constituents. The congressmen aren't representing their constituents. They're representing lobbying firms.
So kind of a different angle, but going off of that, in econ, we've been talking about the stock market crash of 2008, and everything that, like, how it went down and who caused it and all that, and I think probably one of the most disturbing parts of that is like seeing how much money CEOs of all the big banks on Wall Street and, like, how much money they made while everybody else, like, lost their job or took a huge pay cut and, stuff like crazy stuff. And I mean, it's like I can't even wrap my head around the kind of money that like Alan Greenspan held on to.
The millions of
like,
dollars. Yeah,
like literally, like
it's
dollars, like, oh yeah, he won $495 million, and like, then unemployment was at 10%. I'm like, that's just disgusting to me. And so I want to ask your opinion on it, and where you see us going in the future, if there can be change. Pink Floyd has a lyric that says money is the root of all evil today. I personally think that's pretty true. You clearly see it in politics, but where else do you see money being a problem, especially, in your own personal life? Do you like witness that anywhere, and how do you think we can move away from that being such a huge power play?
So, first and foremost, I just want to say, personally, socially, I'm a bit more liberal, but economically, I'm actually pretty conservative, and I believe in supply-side economics. The only issue with that is, and Mr. Moore and I, the econ teacher, my AP econ teacher, he said supply-side economics, whenever you raise the supply, the quantity goes up and the price goes down. And it works. And I said, Mr. Moore, that's a perfect solution. It's too bad we don't live in a perfect world.
Yeah. It's all
And
theoretical.
I 100% believe that everything could work if we were living by graphs. The thing is, though, you have people who want as much money as possible. So they invest in certain banks and they know are going to fail. They bet against it, but then they tell their constituents to vote in to invest in those banks. So whenever they fail, the big banks get more money. And it's like stuff like that cause and then obviously the mortgages. How are you giving people those gargantuous mortgages with only $1,000 down? You're setting people up for failure. And like how you can look someone in the eye and tell them you'll be able to afford this is incorrect. And that's whenever I think government interference should come. I think free market capitalism, the invisible hand that we learned about, it works on its own. But sometimes the government needs to help because human greed comes into play and money comes into play, like you were saying. And I think that it's very challenging to navigate it. And not everyone keeps up with their morals, especially on Wall Street, especially on the Hill. And they kind of lose sight of what their purpose is, and that's to like strengthen the economy. So I think it's important to keep banks regulated at a certain level to where we can avoid a 2008 recession, a resurgence of a 2008 recession. But we have to give the banks enough leniency to let supply side economics do its job. On the other hand, a lot of people talk about raising the minimum wage. I know we learned about raising the minimum wage, and that creates more unemployment because it's an effective price floor, which means that the quantity supplied is bigger than the quantity demanded. So that means that it's unemployment. But the thing is, all these people, there's a saying, you can't feel the effects of the flood if you live on the hill. Well, the people on Capitol Hill don't get paid minimum wage. The people who are getting paid minimum wage are the people in the steel mills that are starting to shut down. They're the people working the 9 to 9 jobs. They're working 12 hours a day at a fast food restaurant. And do you know what? They don't have enough money to support a family, to support themselves even. They have to live in small little apartments. And I think raising the minimum wage, it increases the living standard. And you can counteract it. So you can't always use a graph because you have to look at the people's face and say, what am I going to do with these people who are hurting? So, I don't know. I think it's just important to make sure you have a human face on everything that you do and you really look at the morality of everything and not just look at graphs. I think that's another big issue.
Well, part of being human, I think, is thinking about your own self-interest and having the potential to just kind of be consumed by greed. But do you think, I mean, I don't know, is there any way that we could legislate against being greedy or like somehow discourage that?
Yes. First of all, we take out the super PACs. Super PACs, basically, it's like a loophole where you can't be in contact with a politician, but you can give any amount of sum. So you can't say specifically what it's for. But obviously you can get around that if we're going to be practical. So that's where you start taking the money out of politics. And then there's certain regulations on banks. So for example, there was one of the laws proposed with the Frank Dodds Act, which was in the 2010, I believe, was whenever it was passed. It was recently repealed by the Trump administration, which said that whenever you tell someone what to invest in, you really mean it. And you say this is for their best interest. So as a financial investor, before the Trump administration, you wouldn't be able to say, hey, invest in this bank, and then behind their back say, hey, this bank's going to fail, but we're going to make a few more bucks from this. You had to tell them flat out, listen, don't invest in this bank's about to fail. Invest in this bank, which is going to help you in your mortgage and your 401k and so on and so forth. So I think if we start repealing those acts, so We can start to get a bit more regulation with the big banks, loosen the regulation on the small banks, and really let the economy grow on its own, but under the eye of the government. That's really its job. The American government to really just like guide the free market in the best way possible, and that means setting price limits and not letting people be bought out.
Well, okay. So legislation-wise, I think the regulation will definitely keep that in line. But in terms of like greed and lustful ambition, I I I can't help but hold the opinion that you're not gonna stop that in somebody's heart.
No,
Like stop them from at least trying to find a loop. It's the same thing as the incentive system. As soon as we offer an incentive, someone's gonna figure out a way to exploit it. But do you think humans are inherently evil?
that's a tricky question.
Yeah, I
And
know.
I plan on running for office one day. So give me 2 seconds to think because I don't think people are inherently evil. I think we live in a world where there's a lot of evil around us, but there's also a lot of good around us. And it's your decision on what you want to observe. And I think people naturally want to help each other out. So there are a lot of people from our grade actually who this summer are going to take a few weeks out of their time to build homes in another country for poor people, whether it's in Haiti or Guatemala, or some people are going to go out and they're going to serve in our armed forces, and some people are going to go out and they're going to do social work. Some people are going to go out and they're going to work for nonprofits. Some people are going to go out and they're going to get their college degree and they're going to make the world better. So I don't think people are inherently evil. I think people want to help as much as possible, but sometimes some people lose sight of what really matters in life.
So would you definitely agree that absolute power corrupts absolutely?
No. There have been some very powerful people who have done very great things that have not necessarily been within their self interest. So, let me think. The Pope. This Pope right now,
Francis.
yeah, Pope Francis has a lot of power.
True.
And whatever he says, the they follow what he says because he represents God. Uh, and so you go and you say, this guy, he has all this power and he has a huge base. And whenever he was asked about what he thought about the LGBT community, he said, "Who am I to judge?" I'm absolutely positive a lot of politicians didn't want him to say that. And I'm sure there was some money in him saying that he lost, or some moral, or something that a lot of the church fathers would disagree with. So he had to make a bold step in a direction that was sort of against the grain. So I really appreciate people who do that. And Trump has done some great things too. Trump could focus on a lot of issues, but he put some time into getting the Venezuelan out of Venezuela and the North Koreans out of North Korea. His entire staff did. And I mean, they've done some good things. The Puerto Rico relief, and obviously there have been some issues with the hurricane from Puerto Rico, and it wasn't necessarily the most effective response, but there are so many issues. But FEMA still responded, and there's some good things that are happening around our world. I think it's our decision if we want to focus on it, and then how much we want to see.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is also good things are a lot of times sort of swept under the rug, and we focus on the bad things in life a lot of times, especially the press, because the bad things are what people need to worry about, not necessarily the good things. So we don't necessarily see everyone's accomplishments.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I guess, okay, if humans aren't inherently evil and not always self-interested, I want to talk about The Prince for a second by Machiavelli. That's a huge, I mean, it's like, I don't know. I think Machiavelli is probably you could say he's one of the most evil men of all time. He that whole book is basically like a play on his superiors, but it's also just the content of it itself is like,
It's very Machiavellian.
Yes, exactly. I mean, there's a perfect way to describe it because it's just so, self-interested. It's fueled by self-interested ambition
and pragmatism.
Yeah, exactly.
And it wants to. It's basically laying aside the human face. So I was talking about navigating morality and thinking, okay, supply side economics works, but you have the big people up on Wall Street and you have the small little people who are living in some neighborhood in Chicago. Do you think the big people see the human face down in Chicago? No.
Not at
I don't
all.
think Machiavelli saw the human face. He lived in Florence, right?
Yeah.
Yes. I don't think he saw the human face in Florence.
So are you saying that like if you dehumanize an issue if you're gonna cheat somebody, if you like think about the real consequences, you might reconsider about how to really.
I think, well, Davis, look at this. Right now we're doing a lot of drone work in the military.
Yeah.
These people go to Arizona in a bunker and they fly these drones and they kill people. They kill ISIS members. It's definitely not as hard as someone up in the front lines of the infantry with no guns left, and it's you versus another guy, and one of you is going to die. You see that person's face, and you think, oh my God, this person had a family. This person might have kids. This person lived a life, and I might just end it right now to save my own life. While these people in a drone, they might think of it as a video game. Because they don't see the human face. People have stopped thinking that, like, you need to go out and see and look at people and go out to the neighborhoods that need help. I honestly think that if I ever do run for politics, or as a politician, as a congressman or something like that, I will be out in the neighborhoods that need help because we're NA people. We don't need as much help as the people down in Carnegie, as the people down in the north side. So I think the politicians should be focusing on how do we help these people? These people can't afford to go to a doctor. My mom and dad, whenever I was born, we moved to America. And the insurance copay, we couldn't afford the insurance copay. So whenever I got sick, all my parents could do was pray. Because we couldn't go to the doctor. We couldn't afford a freaking doctor. Mm-hmm. And well, Obamacare's gone. So now people are left without health insurance. A couple million people are left without health insurance. And now they're back to square one where they're saying, oh, what am I going to do if my daughter gets sick? And the government has no response because they lost sight of the human face. Because they looked at a bunch of graphs and a lot of statistics and said, oh my God, we could be using this for so many more things. We could be using this for national defense because we don't have enough aircraft carriers. We need more aircraft carriers. Well, I personally don't believe we need more aircraft carriers. I think we need to fight the war on poverty at home rather than a war internationally. And we're not really fighting anyone anymore. We're still in the Iraq war and the Afghanistan war, but now it's humanitarian relations. We're fighting ISIS with drones and these small things. We don't need aircraft carriers. We don't need to be a military presence. There's no Cold War going on. There's a war at home.
So, okay. I definitely agree with you on those things. The government's not really doing its best, I think, in terms of responding to some of the biggest issues in our nation. National debt, poverty rate, and things like that. I think those are huge. But in another aspect of them not responding to things, I think is just the American story. Do you think the American dream is dead?
No. I lived through the American dream. My dad went to Duke for grad school. And he brought his family over for education. And like I said, we lived in that one-bedroom apartment, and we couldn't afford health care. And we couldn't afford anything. And my parents were living off fast food, and I shared a bed with a twin-sized bed with my mom and dad. Well, 18 years later, I just got a full tuition scholarship to Pitt.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be able to travel the world. We live in a house that is easily 10 to 20 times as big as that one-story apartment. And I have a king-sized bed for some reason. I don't even need a king-sized bed to myself. If you don't call that the American dream, I don't know what is the American dream, because we're living very comfortably and I'm able to afford my own education. And I'm able to work in a place where I have an opportunity to grow. I'm an immigrant and I'm thinking about going into foreign politics to work as a diplomat. And I know if I set my mind to it, I'm going to become a diplomat.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question about it. And I think everyone has a chance to do that, including the dreamers. Through DACA, that's another example of not looking at the human face. Where you look at these kids, I was almost held by Romanians, the TSA version of Romania, because my mom didn't have a note from my dad saying I could go back to America with her. So I would have had to stay in Romania. And I remember my mom was crying, I was crying, and we eventually got it figured out. But I was thinking, I'm never going to see my mom again. And I still had my grandparents to live back on. But every single time I hear these stories, DACA's ruining us. These immigrants are coming in and they're just destroying our economy. These people they're supporting us. They're working those low-level wages just to get by because they believe in the American dream. And what are we doing right now? We're kicking them back out. Because of this is politically incorrect, but because of the color of their skin or where they come from, they're put into these groups and they're saying, oh, you can't come in here because you're a criminal. Your people are criminals.
That's not politically incorrect. I think that's truth. I mean, people, I think I think old white money is probably, if anybody's listening to this small podcast on the Nash Uproar, they're probably, pissed off right now, but it's just because it's true. I think there's a lot of issues in our nation that, are fueled by stereotypes and just inflammatory decision making. But that's a good point, though, Stefan. You're a prime example of the American dream. It's pretty inspiring.
Thank you.
So yeah, man. So we're just running out of time, but I just want to give you a little plug at the end here. Tell us what's going on in your life. What can people look forward to? Keep in touch to know about. Just time is yours, man.
All right. My Instagram is rbstefan, so you guys can hit me up with a follow. I will be, like I said, I'm going to Pitt. I'm planning on spending a year in Paris, where I'll be going to a school called Sciences Po. And then after that, I hope to be going to grad school. Afterwards, I hope to move to New York or DC. But this summer specifically, I'll just be hanging out. I'm going to be working on a few political campaigns, and then I'll be working. But just a quick reminder to everyone out there. I know maybe there are some juniors listening to this with senior year coming up, and then seniors right now whenever you're graduating. Enjoy your summer, because this is a time of rest, and it's a time of rejuvenation, and it's a time where you don't necessarily need to focus on everything that's happening, and you can just relax. So make sure to take advantage of that opportunity. Might buy a hammock. I might buy a hammock. Have you? That would be pretty cool.
Get an Eno, brother.
What's an Eno?
They're great hammocks. I have one.
All right, shout out to Eno. I might just grab a Eno.
You can hook one up and just chill.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. Well, anyway, it was great to have you on the show, Stefan. Thanks for being here, man.
Oh, thank you, Davis, for having me. It was a great time.
Absolutely. Good luck at Pitt and everything.
Thank you. Good luck to you at Rhodes.
Thanks. It's gonna be a wild ride.
For sure.
Well, this has been the Headbanger, and thank you all listeners for staying in tune all 9 episodes of the season. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be on this philosophical, political life adventure with all of you. Make sure you stay in touch with the Uproar for all upcoming podcasts and news articles coming your way, all about your life at Nash and abroad. Thank you, everyone that listened for all of this season of the Headbanger, and I love you all.